Hello, welcome to Genre Blackademia, the podcast where we spill that intellectual tea about your favorite genre media from the Black academic perspective. Featuring your hosts, R.J. Joseph and John Edward Lawson. Rhonda currently works as an associate professor of English in Houston, Texas. Her acclaimed academic essays and short fiction have appeared in numerous anthologies, and she is the author of Hell Hath No Sorrow, Like a Woman Haunted. John is the co-founder of Raw Dog Screaming Press and author of stories, poetry, and nonfiction, and currently serves as vice president of diverse writers and artists of speculative fiction. This is episode 1. Black Women Protagonists in Horror. To stay up to date with what's coming up, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Genre Blackademia Podcast and on Twitter at Genre Black Pod. We hope you enjoy the episode. Now let's get straight into it. We are talking today about Black women protagonists. It is Women in Horror Month here, and my personal perspective, where I've been sitting, it seems that Black women don't get enough respect put on their name, and we see them around, but all too often in the background. Now, I spoke with Rhonda about this, and she had a great idea to do an episode on this. And what were some of the things that came to mind for you, Rhonda? Some of the folks maybe we've been reading about or watching on screen that we should talk about.
Well, I think we should definitely talk about this new iteration of horror movies, right? That kind of includes Ma and Us. Sweetheart was one that I really enjoyed. So we have more classic horror movies that have Black women in them, right, as protagonists. There's Demon Knight. There is one of the Alien iterations. I always get mixed up with the numbers, right, of the shows or of the different movies. They go into all these different numbers. But we need to talk about these things. There was Spell from just maybe last year or 2020, maybe. They had these Black women as leads. And these are the movies that we just don't hear a whole lot about. Right? So I was just on another podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about Antebellum. And so that was another one. Like, I expected all these movies to make this huge splash, and I expected people to just go, oh my gosh, and still be talking about it. But they kind of came and it was a little blip, and then it just went away. And I feel some type of way about that.
Well, it's funny that you mention it that way. I feel like there have been not waves, but peaks introducing people to the concept, and stuff breaks through and you think it's going to change things and doesn't in the way that you think. I think maybe from the perspective of some of the creators out there, they realize, oh, we can do this. Like you mentioned in the Alien franchise, Alien vs. Predator, that was actually a while ago now. I didn't realize how long it's been since that.
Right.
That was like 2003 or 2005 or something. And you had, what's her name, Sanaa Lathan as Lex in the lead of that.
Yeah.
And she was kicking butt from the beginning. Before there was any aliens, before there was any predators, she was out there on the ice by herself, going up a cliff, taking calls. And it was wild watching her from the jump, dealing with white men, telling her what to do. And like, no, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, she jumped out there like that. Like, she was boss from the beginning, and she was like, I'm not having it. And so, even when the movie first aired, though, like, I just don't remember a ton. And we can talk about, of course, like, what circles are we talking about too? Or are you talking about in horror circles? Or are you talking about in Black people circles? Or are you talking about a mainstream circle? And so I think sometimes we do have to make that distinction, right? Because in Black people circles, I think we're always talking about this stuff. We talk about it amongst each other. We talk about it with our friends and family and everything. We write about it. But that doesn't mean that those discussions and that discourse actually travels to the mainstream audience, or even that it translates into like the genre audiences. So, we can talk about this stuff all day long. Like, we know that there are classics, right? Or there's these depictions, but I don't think that outside of these circles that these things get enough attention. So I guess we should make that distinction. Like, we talk about stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like,
once you get outside, yeah.
It's so good to talk with you about these things, because yes, it does impact, it impacts everything. Who are you talking about? Who is perceiving it? Who is involved? What circles are we talking about? Staying within the Alien franchise, I remember one time watching the behind the scenes footage, outtakes and stuff, making of for the very first Alien movie, which was that 1979, I guess, or so. And there was this one scene when the surviving characters were finally dealing with, okay, this is bad and we gotta do something about it. And Sigourney Weaver's character was trying to tell them how it was. And Yaphet Kotto made her keep doing it over and over again. And finally he slammed down and stuff. He's like, I am a Black man with a following. You tell me something, make it real, make it convincing. Are you yelling at me? Are you telling me what's happening? Or are you asking? And so yeah, I mean, it does make a difference. And what we have seen, and, tapping into that, these women are very often challenged, like I was mentioning with Lex, her character, from the beginning, and she establishes herself as, boom, this unbreakable character who knows what, is an expert, is educated, is strong, is dynamic, and is not going to bow, which of course I guess is why the Predators eventually, spoiler alerts, make her like an honorary. They do the marking with the acid blood, just like they do on themselves as they rite of passage when they kill the aliens and whatnot.
Yes.
But I mean, there are plenty of other Black women protagonists that we can look at here too that follow in that same line.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because I am still enamored of Lupita Nyong'o's depiction of Adelaide and Red in Us. Like, I mean, really, I was all in my feelings when, award season came and left, and she was not actually a serious contender. Because it's got to be exhausting to play like two different characters in the same storyline. Like, as a writer, I have to do that a lot inside my head. But like, as an actress, I would think that would be even more difficult to do. And she did it. Granted, everybody in the movie did it. Like, those kids were wonderful, wonderful performers. Like, I was really excited about that. And so, but with her specifically, like, she managed to play two completely different women who just happened to look alike. And so one of the things that really stood out to me about that movie, and I think that unfortunately it just kind of was in the shadows of Get Out. I think that it was kind of, the idea of it was kind of so far out the box that people didn't really know what to do with it. And so I think that it's a wonderful movie in its own right. Because it talks about the whole idea of cloning, the whole idea of the haves and have-nots. And to me, as a Black person, like, I really saw the parallels with class. So the class divisions, right? Like, you have the people who are acceptable and the people who are not. They're literally under the ground, right? And so for her to be able to play two different women in this world and make them look like two different people, Like never for a minute was I confused. Not just because of their hair different and they carried them, but I was not confused at all by the way that she portrayed them. Most specifically, how she portrayed their motherhood experiences. That was phenomenal. You had Red Adelaide, who was a clone. First of all, she was supposed to be a whole monster, but she was capable of loving her children so much. She was willing to give her life for them. She also had like the sympathy for Adelaide Red's children. She didn't want them to die. She didn't want them to suffer, right? And so then you have the other one, the clone. So you have Adelaide Red or Red Adelaide. I get them mixed up sometimes, right? But she didn't like her kids. She didn't even want to have them. She didn't even want to mate with the guy. But she was like, because you mated with him, I had to go off with him. And I didn't want, these are monsters. They're terrible. I don't like kids anyway, like yuck. So it gave something a little bit different than I think we get to see with Black women, because you can't have the Black woman say she doesn't want to be the mom. You just can't have that. And here we go on the screen, they actually put it, she did it. Just like, no, they're monsters. I don't even like them like that. I don't really like that about you.
Well, she really went all out, and it was an amazing performance. And I wonder how much of her commitment as an artist was due to the fact that she knew that she was working with Black director, Black writer, Black production company, had that support and the knowledge of, historically what it goes into being a Black creator in this space, into living this experience, into these subjects. And like you said, it's very important. Like, how often have you ever seen that on screen? You see, white characters saying this stuff about kids all the time, right? When do we see Black characters ever saying that? I mean, we know historically in terms of, I'll say it, my family, my father's side came out of enslaved people, going all the way back to, I live in the DC area, going back to George Washington's Mount Vernon. So, you're definitely not going around some elders from the 1920s and 30s talking about no population growth, no children, what are we doing to the planet, or I don't like kids, or you're not saying.
It ain't happening.
But to have this space where you can actually portray this, to do something, and to do it in a way that is considered and measured within the Black experience, and not coming out of maybe a creator who is not of that background, who may not know how to navigate all these vagaries of the Black culture and what certain things mean or don't mean. So it was very interesting to see her really give herself over to that, and also play with, possibly, also the idea of how we switch, when we're dealing with, again, like you said, different circles. Who are we when we are at home versus out in the world, and in terms of what we're acting, but also how we're perceived as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. There's also that idea that there was the one scene that lives in my head all the time when when Adelaide Red had Red Adelaide's head, like face, like down on the coffee table there, pressed against the glass, and then one of the babies cries. And so she kind of, from under her hand, she goes, I think that's yours. And so you can see the frustration, because at first, Adelaide Red is like, I don't care who it is, Holly. I really don't care. Like, she is all about trying to kick her butt, right? And then she's like, but then she feels pressured, because she's in the face of this other mom, and like, you get that. Like, I totally felt that moment where she was like, oh, I don't like these kids, and I really didn't want them anyway, but I guess I am responsible for them. Let me go see what the problem is. They always hollering about something. And so, I was feeling that moment, It was like, just when I get to have something I want, Here they go. They get to hollering and stuff. And so it was really important. And I think that you bring up a really good point. As far as like how much freedom do you have as an actor or creative person when you know you have the support? Because there was some definite what I would call black mama moments in there. Like when they start hearing the noises and she is like, go get your shoes. Go put your shoes on. You know, if your mama tell you put your shoes on, you don't ask no questions. You don't stop to think, you go put your shoes on. Because something is about to go down and we need to gotta stay ready, right? So that was really, really cool to see. And even in as sort of a mirror to the other mom, Elizabeth, and her last name escapes me. It isn't that she didn't seem to love her kids, but they were teenagers and there were two of them. And so she sort of had this kind of detached sort of a thing, right? And she was just like, okay, they just do whatever they do. And, you know, I mean, I care about them and I love them, they're mine, but yeah, I'm going to let them do whatever. So you kind of had, you know, Red Adelaide on this one end of the motherhood spectrum. I love my kids. I live for them. Then you had the Elizabeth lady who was kind of in the middle, kind of like, yeah, I love them and whatever, but yeah, they're going to leave one day and okay. And then you had Adelaide Red, who was all just like, yeah, I don't really want them. I don't really care about them all that much either. So it was a really, really good way that they showed those experiences. But I'm sure that there was a lot of confidence in having that support because having a Black director, someone Black behind the camera or directing the action, you kind of know that there's going to be a different type of inauthenticity that everything doesn't get. Right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up about the shoes, because that kid literally ran as fast to go get the shoes as the other times when he was actually running for his life. It was the same. It was literally the same.
Same urgency, yes. Yes, right? Even to this day, if I ever say to the kid, get your shoes, they already know what that means. They're like, okay, wait, it's go time. Let's. And there was something I read also that said that Peel insisted on her hair being in those little sister locks because there haven't been women depicted with that hairstyle on screen before that. And so I know it gave me life because I was like, oh, those are so cute. And oh my gosh, and I wonder who did that. There was this idea behind, hey, and if I was going to be running for my life, I'd probably be wearing sister locks too, because it's real easy to maintain. They don't get in your way. You know what I mean? You just kind of pull them back a little bit and they kind of stay. So you don't have you don't got to get the hair band thing. Nope, you're already ready to roll. You're ready to do whatever you got to do. And so that was really important too.
Yes. I mean, it's funny that we're still in this. I mean, this phrase gets bandied about a lot in these discussions, but in this day and age, we're still having these firsts. I mean, that came out in 2019, I guess. Is that right?
Yes.
And we're still having first major lead actress with these sister locks or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So breaking this ground and also being able to bring, on the one hand, there's circles who perceive our culture as scary, but also bring our culture to what is perceived as traditionally scary. What's traditionally scary has generally been a space for other people, other cultures, and even when we were immersed in those scary spaces, we were just sort of tourists, I guess, or passing through or whatever. But here's one who's really rooted in this world. A real person, somebody you might know, fully represented, and then, of course, for the audiences, that lets us invest even more with our empathy to be scared, to rooting for her, and also in terms of not just dealing with the Black aspect, but the Black women aspect. One of the things I do as a creator, as an editor, publisher, as a consumer, I look at scenes in films or TV, try to judge, if this lead character was really a man, and they just were like, okay, well, there's this actress, we're just going to flip it up, and now we can market this as for women. Mm-hmm. Let's flip the climax of us which men are going to be doing the ballet scene, doing ballet, which requires physical stamina, endurance, strength, and skill. Which men are going to be doing the ballet fight?
Right.
In the climax. This was for women. This was meant to be a woman. This was meant to be fully feminine, but still violent, engaging, and serious as heck. That climax was real, but it was also dance, and it was great.
It was, right? And when you say that, it is usually real obvious, right? When a character was designed to be one thing, like one depiction, but then by the time it gets to production, it turns into something different, because there's a veneer, right? You can almost see like the mask, for lack of a better word, you can always see the mask there, and it's like, but I don't know that's really that feels as honest. I don't know that feels honest because, when you really think about it, there are certain things that can face people that reside in certain types of bodies, right? And so for a little Black girl to have been abandoned in a place where she does not understand what's happening, she unfortunately had probably already been, exposed to enough terror that she was like, now I was having a hard enough time getting along up there with the people that I almost was starting to understand. Now I'm down here with these other beings and I don't really know how to cope. Like, how exactly do I balance this? And so I think that using somebody that's really, really vulnerable in our society, which are little Black girls, that really made a huge difference in this movie. Like, just from the very beginning, even before we knew that they had switched out. It was just the idea that, okay, these are the most vulnerable people that we have in our society. So the idea that one of them would be so terrified where she was that she'd be willing to sacrifice the other just so that she could possibly be out of danger, like, that makes perfect sense. It just doesn't really work if you have people in more privileged positions doing that, because you kind of have to think, well, what are the stakes? Why are you trading out anyway? Like, where's the danger? What are you running from? What's the problem? But the fact that these are little Black girls, I immediately was like, yeah, you gotta hope that the next world is way better than the one you're in. You just gotta hope that, because there's so much horror, that we see. So I just don't know that it would have had the same impact, and not just because I'm a Black woman, but because by placing this and centering this on these two little Black girls and these two Black ladies, like, that definitely, to me, made the stakes way different.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, we've seen these sorts of things before, but what are the stakes? Like, there's an obvious comparison. She's in the fun house. There's the mirrors. She goes through to the other side. You have Alice in the looking glass. What were the stakes for Alice, and how scary did that feel versus the stakes for this person and how scary that was?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't, it wasn't until I think maybe Tim Burton put his stamp on that whole Alice in the Wonderland story that I even thought that she was in any trouble, right? Like, as a kid, I read the first version. I'm like, okay, all right. You just want to go on an adventure, Alice. That's great.
It was like an adventure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat next, or you got to worry about, dodging pedophiles, and you ain't got to worry about gunfire, and you got to worry about broken glass in the park. I mean, I'm so glad you don't have these problems, Alex. That's great.
Right. So, it is a very interesting film and story and character that encapsulates so many issues for Black women, especially right now in our times. On the flip side of that, with all the motherhood issues wrapped up in that particular character, Red and Adelaide, the flip side of that, we have Ma. And I'm sure you have lots of thoughts about Ma, what she represents, what she went through, her character Octavia Butler and her whole portrayal of things. What was your takeaway with Ma?
Well, okay, so with Ma, it was like one of my new favorites. When I say new, past couple of years, because first of all, I really appreciate that she was a middle-aged, heavy-set Black woman. Like I don't see myself depicted in that way a lot, especially not in horror. There was, oh my gosh, I remember, Jeepers Creepers, the original one. I can't remember what year it came out in, but that lady who was the psychic, she was an older, heavyset Black woman, but she also didn't play a very big role there, right? She was usually the place where they put the Black women that were a certain age. You're the mammy, you're somebody's grandma, you just kind of, you feed everybody, you just kind of feed into that whole stereotype. But
you show up as the magical Negro, and yeah.
Yes, you're the magical Negro. Yes, because she was totally the magical Negro, right? And so the first thing I was excited about was just that she was a middle-aged and heavy-set. I was like, okay, they're not trying to make her look young. They ain't trying to make her be nobody's grandma already. And so this was great. But I really loved how that character flipped that mammy trope. And I've talked about this before in presentations. She took that trust that people automatically want to give heavy-set older Black women, because they're thinking, oh, she's going to take care of me. She's going to coddle me. She's going to be nice. She totally played on that trust and then flipped that upside down and turned it against everybody in the story. Because, she was virtually invisible to the grown-ups, even though she went to school with them. And, whenever they would flash back to the high school scenes, I didn't see a whole lot of other Black kids. I didn't see any more Black kids in those hallways, in those circles. So I'm like, how did you not know that she was still hearing that this is who this was? I mean, did you have a lot of other choices? But that's an invisibility and I think you and I might have talked about this a little bit before. I'm kind of excited about middle age because I'm waiting to become invisible, right? Like, I want to be able to move around and folks don't pay attention to me because they're trying to, get my phone number, or they, might want to assault me or whatever. It's just like, I love the idea of that. Like, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Can we pretend I'm not here yet? And so the grown-up, she was really invisible to them. She would have been invisible to the kids, except they're kids, right? And that's, what kids do. They just wanted to get the alcohol. And so she managed to do this whole nice, nasty thing with them. And so even she managed to keep their sympathy by playing on it very much so, by actually making them care more about her than she really cared about them. And so I really love to see her lean into that. I was like, yes, I love seeing monsters be able to be monsters. Let the monster do what monsters do. Let this happen. And she was a booger of a monster, right? Even if we could be sympathetic towards what made her become this way, the fact of the matter is she was trying to kill those kids. She was trying to kill them. And so to see a Black woman go to kill this whole bunch of kids that are mostly white, and then the one little Black kid, she's all like, ain't real room for one of us. I mean, when I say that tickled me so, it's like, so she's acknowledging, hey, I know how this works, and if there's only one Black person, it's going to be me. It's not going to be you. But also the whole idea of her as a mother, being willing to hurt these kids and kill them, really is what her goal was. And then she's a mother herself. Now, granted, she didn't treat her daughter all that well. She kind of had that whole, she had her pretending she was disabled. And I never could figure out if the girl really had any disabilities. It seemed like her mother had just perpetuated all that on her so she could keep her out of school. And then, the mother in me thinks about that. And I'm like, there's been so many times I wanted to pull my kids out of school because I want to protect them. And then I think, but can I give them what they need here at home? Well, the answer was always no. And I'm like, you got to put them out in the world. They got to interact with other people, but you have to protect them as best you can. And so she went about it the whole wrong way. That is not how you do that. You don't make your child think she's disabled and she's really not. You don't drug kids. You don't do that. And you don't lock them up. You might want to, but you don't do that. Yeah, that's not something you're supposed to do. So this character got me excited for a whole lot of different reasons. But mostly those things was that she was something that we don't get to see all the time. And she was able to lean all the way in. And like, I was really excited. Every time she did something more atrocious than the last thing, I was like, what? what? Really? Girl, no. So that's like the best feeling when you're like, girl, but I feel you though. I know why you're thinking about doing that. I know why you did that. I mean, yeah, you're not supposed to do that, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah. There were so many issues tied up in all that, and but she was relatable. It's just also, maybe it was even generational because we see life is a bit better for her daughter, but she herself is still dealing with these traumas of the past. And I know coming up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like we did, we were dealing with all this stuff being put on us from people who came up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you know what I mean? And trying to navigate that world. So it was interesting to see how she obsessed over her daughter and projected so many of her own traumas and insecurities and, weirdly, hopes, like you said, trying to protect her on her in these ways that ended up being obviously super unhealthy. And it wasn't really clear what happened to her husband. It was sort of hinted. She kept talking about how he went away and stuff. But
I don't think that her daddy went away nowhere. I think he was buried in her backyard or in the old backyard.
Right.
She killed that man, I'm pretty sure.
So, I mean,
I'm pretty sure she had something to do with that.
Yeah. There's something going on there. But it's cool. They didn't spell it out. Right. They treat you like, all right, well, you can just think about things. And not everything in a Black person's life is, consumable content. There's the whole
I love that
accusation of trauma porn and whatnot. We don't need to expose all the traumas. We don't need to go into all that. Plus, also, maybe that's part 2, if this does well.
Exactly. Right? Oh, yes. I love how you put that. That makes a lot of sense. And it also goes to good storytelling. Sometimes you just have to trust your audience. You got to trust them to just come to conclusions on their own sometimes. I know that, of course, I thought about that, but I mean, I'm Southern. And here, even in my own family, you always have those talks, right? About the one uncle that passed away, and auntie was kind of, she was good friends with the conjure woman, and and everybody just kind of goes, yeah, well, it must have been his time to go, and you just kind of leave it at that.
Right.
Even if behind the scenes, women of a certain age in the family are kind of, winking and nodding and like, yeah, girl, she took care of that, right? So that's a part of that that subversiveness that women can kind of move in, because if people don't expect you to do certain stuff, well, then they don't suspect you when things happen anyway. Right. And so, that was a moment. Like, I'm just paranoid like that. I'm just like, wait a minute, but what happened to your husband for real, girl? What happened to that man for real? Like, okay, we're not gonna talk about it, but okay.
Well, there were so many issues, again, depending on which circle we're talking about. In my background, I had an uncle who went out for bread one day and never came back. Mm-hmm. Now, who knows if he left the family, he had 4 kids. Who knows if something happened to him, if he got snatched up by folks around here. Back then, the KKK was still strong around here. I had an uncle who... There's alcoholism in my father's side of the family. One uncle who was always falling down drunk and going in and out of jail, even though he had a good job in a nice house. Yeah. Had another uncle who, the second oldest in my father's family, he got drunk one night and he was divorced by that point, and he passed out, fell on his head on the table and bled to death there on the floor.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things happening to Black men in the community. There's dudes being snatched up on bogus charges or legitimate charges, but getting maximum sentences for trifling things because the prison system needs laborers. And we have seen, there's the difference between a Black woman and a white man and a Black man and a white woman. White man gets a Black woman pregnant, how likely is he to stick around? and
Right.
be like, okay,
There's
we're getting married. We're going to do the right thing.
Sure.
And so that could also be part of that resentment she was talking about.
Exactly. Well, exactly. And we know that she was traumatized, like, as a kid. I can't pretend like that trauma just ended there. And so, you know, that's excellent. That's an excellent point. Is that, yeah, like, she could have continued to be traumatized, like, within this marriage. Like, who knows? Like, we don't know, you know? And so I like that they kind of left it, though, right? It's just kind of put it out there. It was just like, because I'm sure somebody somewhere was sitting there going, but where her daddy, and her daddy can't come help her, you know? Her daddy can't come save her. It's like, sometimes the daddy's not available for whatever reason. And we're not talking about him anyway. Like, I like that. We're not talking about him. We're talking about her. We're talking about them right here, right now.
Right.
So, yeah. And the idea of that, the generational stuff, I think that the movie did a really good job at that, because that wasn't the only cycle, right? Like, the lead girl and her mom had their own little cycle going, where the mama stood by and let Sue-Ann get, you know, she was actually sexually assaulted is what it was. She stood by and let that happen. She didn't speak up about it. And so the girl made a big point, like, to tell her mom, I'm not my mama. I'm going to do something different. And so it gives a lot of hope for Sue-Ann's daughter, right? That even though, because I'm sure, you know, if mama dead now, won't know your daddy yet. She might have had to go into the foster care system. By this point, she probably had some actual health issues that needed to be attended to. Like, if you stay in a wheelchair for a really long time, you know, your muscles will start to atrophy. And so you have to you got to go to, you know, physical therapy. You got to, you know, she got to think about all the drugs that her mama was putting in her system. So she has a long road to recovery, but we can see that actually might happen for her, because she's not her mother. She doesn't have to be her. Now, of course, yeah, if they wanted to do a sequel, yeah, of course, we could always do, you know, the daughter comes back or something. I mean, we could, and she found a daddy. I don't know, maybe.
It seemed like the movie did pretty well, and I was looking into it, and it seemed like there was some sort of talk of possibly a sequel. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
That'd be cool, though.
Yeah.
But,
I'm interested in that.
Now, are there any other Black women leads that come to mind for you here? I know you mentioned Spell, and I was real excited because I hadn't thought of that. That was a brilliant movie. I love that movie. But the woman in that is not necessarily a protagonist. She is central to things.
Right. Yes. Oh, my gosh. So first of all, I love Loretta Devine anyway. Like, I've never seen her in something where she was terrible. And I'm thinking even from like Waiting to Exhale, when that came out, I was really rooting for her character, right? Because she like wears her southernness. Like, if I'm not mistaken, she's from here in the Houston area. And she wears her southernness on her sleeve. Like, she has never tried to be anything other than that, right? And so I really, really appreciated that she really put me in mind of Annie Wilkes from Misery, except Black and way more dangerous, right? So she was like ruling with such an iron fist, but she was also so matter of fact. And I remember thinking when I saw her, okay, these are the Southern Black women that I don't really get to see on TV that much. Like, you know, we could always talk about Tyler Perry. That's a whole other discussion, his Madea character. But I was like, no, this lady was a lot different from Madea. Even Medea's like an urban grandma. This lady that she played was the Southern grandma she was not my grandma, but she was a lot of people's grandmas. You know, she's just like, I'm going to call a spade, and this is what it do. And I'm letting you know what we here to do with you. You ain't going nowhere. You're going to stay right here. Mm-hmm. You ain't going nowhere.
It's interesting. You know, when I teach my Afro-surrealism in horror class, it's one of the films I go to, Spell, because it's very easy to delineate when we're talking about appropriation or, in particular, African American spirituality, as you know, as encapsulated by a Southern Black population and drawing from African roots, but also with a unique African American presentation. You compare that to Skeleton Key. You ever see that movie, Skeleton Key?
Oh, yes.
And you have comparable stories there of things happening in terms of some of the plot points and especially, the overall machinations and goals of people within the plot.
Exactly.
But it plays out so differently. It feels so different. And also from a, I don't know if you want to talk about sensitivity or whatever, authenticity perspective and how Black characters are handled and whatnot. I'm going with Spell.
Oh, for sure. All the way. You can totally tell, and I enjoy both movies, of course, right? Because I love these kind of movies, like the whole historical aspect and the religion and Black people, and I love it all. But yes, I would use Spell just feels different. It's because it was viewed through a different lens. You can tell that it was made more through the lens of Black experiences. And Black culture, as opposed to being looked at through a lens of the dominant culture, writing a story for them. So I love Kate Hudson. She's a brilliant actress. Again, I enjoy her a lot. I think she did a real good job, but you could tell who the movie was for. It was for an audience of other non-Black people. And I only say non-Black because it was very general. If you notice, there was not a ton of nuance. They did not focus on the specifics of how that particular religion worked, right? Like they just kind of threw it out there. They were like, here it just is. And where again, I can appreciate that confidence in the audience, but I also understand when it's used as a tool to just keep everything general, to keep from having to look under the covers and under the blankets and in the closet, right? So you give this general idea, this is how the religion works, and then you focus it on the character development, which was a good choice. That was great. But in Spell, you got to look at everything. It's like, oh no, this is how it works. And even though he tries to consider himself the main guy character, I'm just terrible with names. He tries to convince himself that what's happened is not happening. He knows. Mm-hmm. He is like, I'm not so far removed from my own Black experiences that I don't know that this is what's happening, and I need to do something about it because I'm in big trouble right here. Like this ain't gonna go down the way I kind of need for it to if I try to act like I'm so bougie I don't understand nothing no more that have to do with Black people. He had to dig deep, and it was like, oh wait, I do know what this is. This is what I'm gonna have to do to get out of here. It's not gonna be as easy as you just flip over something or set something off. No, it ain't gonna be that easy. I'm gonna have to do a little more work, and it's gonna have to be root work. I'm gonna have to do that. It's gonna have to be rooted in what I know is gonna work here. And so you're right. Spell, hands down.
Oh yeah. And again, going back to Skeleton Key, and I'm not knocking people. Who knows what they signed up for? Could have been a totally different script, and as they were shooting, things got changed. Producers left, director quit, or they brought in new writers to do final stuff. Even in the edits, they might have cut out crucial things or rearranged things to be a certain way. But again, coming back to what lens was it through? It was through the lens of Black spirituality being scary stuff, right? Whereas in Spell, we have a lot of the tenets of African religion. The community aspect. It wasn't just some crazy old lady out in some, mountaintop in some ramshackle place. There was a lot of people involved. It was a real thing, the whole thing,
Yes.
And when you talked about how this is somebody's grandmother out there, I just harken back to, I grew up very separate from the rest of my family. And I remember one time, my mother and I were talking about chamomile tea, and my dad sort of whipped around like that meme of that guy looking over his shoulder, like what, just going off about chamomile tea and how that's all just a bunch of nonsense and stuff. And I was asking him about it, and he was like talking about his mother and how she believes in all that and all these different roots and whatnot and blah blah. And maybe that's why I was never around my grandmother, because she was out here on some mountain out here in Appalachia, Western Maryland, Virginia, what have you. They are from out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia. I did see the ancestral home one time. It was abandoned. There was a hole in the floor where somebody fell through the floor and broke their legs and was laying out there all night.
Oh, wow.
So it's a whole thing. Go into that some other time. But definitely somebody's grandmother.
Talk about that. Yes.
Definitely somebody's grandmother.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So because my immediate paternal and maternal, so my grandmother's, my father's mother was very mean, but she wasn't like this lady. It was a different kind of thing. And then my mother's mother was just as sweet and dear. I swear she was like a saint walking amongst us. And of course I'm biased on that. But but her mother was probably the closest, but she still wasn't as outspoken as this lady. Right? She was the one that was going to be, you catch her on the porch smoking, drinking well up into her older age and cussing and fussing and doing all of that, And so I know that these women exist. I almost, and the way that she kind of ruled that community, like with this iron fist, there was none of that whole, but you're the woman and you can't be the boss of us, right? There was none of that. It was like, she is the boss. She's running this and we just do what she tells us to do. Right? What she has said and told us to do has worked so far. So we're willing to roll with her on this. And so there was also that idea of a woman as not just this cult leader, but a community leader. And of course, here in the Black community, even with experiences that vary and are different, for the most part, we revere our elders. Right? It's just that the women aren't always as revered as we would like for them to be sometimes. They don't always hold that positioning, like maybe secretly or within households, but within communities, like you kind of can look at them, but you don't really expect them to do a lot. Right? Like my mother's gotten to the age where she's now the mother of the church. She's one of the mothers of the church. And you can tell that she loves her position, and I love it for her because it's really important to her, right? She is the epitome of the Southern Baptist church lady, right? I mean, complete with the no smoking, no cussing, no drinking. I mean, she's wonderful. She's wonderfully brilliant. And she's also a Southern church lady. So when she says that and she refers to herself that way, and I'm kind of like, oh, I guess you would be Mother Jackson. That makes a lot of sense. And so in the church, her opinions hold a lot of sway, right? Because she is an elder of the church. Here at home with us, her opinion holds a lot of sway because she's the mama, right? But I can't say that in the larger scheme of things that necessarily, because even she, if confronted with the situation where, okay, you make this decision, or here's this guy that can make this decision, she's going to defer to that guy. Right? It's a part of our culture, the way we were brought up, especially her and her generation. So it's not to, most of the time when you see Black women in those positions, it's kind of a hidden support kind of thing, where you don't see that she's the person behind the screen. But this lady was all like, I'm it. The buck starts and ends right here.
Yes, indeed. And the comparison I like to make is, again, because you're dealing with similar themes, similar plot points, you stack up Spell. Okay, we've compared it to Skeleton Key. Let's compare it to Get Out. Now, Get Out, women were prominent in that, but they still needed the men to accomplish all this stuff. Spell, she's like, I'm here now. I'm doing this.
Right? Exactly.
I'm making boss moves.
Yes, and all of y'all better do what I say, or else you know what that means.
Right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It was very enjoyable to kind of see this. I also like that reckoning though that the character had to come to with the whole, like, you could tell he was one of those, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a different type of mobility for yourself or your family, but you could tell that he was like, he had come out of the mountains, like his heritage was there, and he was all like, I'm far removed from that. I don't tell my kids nothing about this. My wife don't know nothing about this. We talk about code switching. You mentioned that a little bit ago. And so you can see the code switching there, where he wants to be known as this person far divorced from that. And we see that a lot in our communities. And so I can appreciate the way that being immersed in this mountain community kind of made him realize, hey, the community ain't all bad. you might kind of want to think about it, because when you left all by yourself in trouble, what are you going to do? Because you live this other existence. Can you really, even if your phone worked, could you call those homies? Would they come all the way from the city to help you out here in the mountains? You know, like, you got to kind of think about the relationships that you build. And I would like to think that after the movie was done, like after that, this character actually sat down with his kids and was like, you know what? Let me tell y'all something. Let me explain this. This is our heritage. This is important. And I think that speaks a lot to a lot of the Black experience, where we see, you know, we want to do differently. We don't want to raise our kids in poverty if we don't have to, even though we grew up that way. But at the same time, how do you do that and not be totally divorced from, but this is still our past and this is still a part of us? And it's not all bad. It's not all bad. It's not necessarily all good either, but it is what it is. So it's kind of important to stay connected, because that's literally what saved his life.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, I talked about my Afro surrealism and horror class, and one of the big tenets of that is the, again, community aspect. And like you said, he turned his back on that. He was out here false flagging, being a fancy architect or whatever urban renewal dude had become. And really, he comes from it's a Black deliverance, right? It's like the whole backwoods banjo deliverance scenario, but for Black folks.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, he's putting up this front, and he gets caught out in his trying to put on these airs or whatever. And like, who could he call from this new life? Who would be authentic enough to come running? Now, those kids of his, if he told them to go get their shoes, would they have that same reaction?
Exactly. No, and you can tell they wouldn't, because I want to say there's a scene when they went to gas up the plane, maybe, where he's kind of saying, come on, let's go. And you kind of know that tone, right? You just know that tone when you have a Black parent. You know what the tone is. You don't even have to explain it, but when you hear it, you act on it, right? And no, the kid was all like, oh, he's still trying to talk to the little, stranger guy, right? It's like, no, they would not know. When he said, put your shoes on, they're not going to know. They're going to totally miss it. And his wife going to be standing there talking about, what you talking about? What? And the thing, she doesn't even know, because, we don't know what her background is, though, either, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's something when you seek to divorce yourself from all of this stuff. Sometimes you got to have a level of awareness that lets you know, but there are some good aspects that we need to retain. Like, we need to retain this knowledge so that we can keep our antennas up and see when stuff is going down. It's not supposed to be going down. We have to keep this knowledge of community. We have to keep that understanding. Even the family didn't seem to work as an actual cohesive family, right? Like, each of the members was kind of doing their own thing. And I understand that life with teenagers is like that. Like, because we both have teenagers at home, they kind of tend to be very, very self-centered, and everything is really about them. But even so, you should be able to see some family dynamics. And that family just didn't seem to have those kind of connections. It's not that they didn't care about each other. It's just that you kind of wondered, okay, so exactly what did this new life bring for you? Like, what is that good? That you all are kind of doing separate stuff all the time? Like, the only thing we know about you is that you're doing this kind of non-cohesive thing? Or, have you thought about other valuable ways to kind of put this into your life? But you divorce yourself from all of that. Because one thing about rural communities, even though there tends to be a lot of physical space, like as far as the land and stuff, the actual homes don't always have all that kind of space. And so you get like people living on top of each other, and you got to be friends with your siblings because you're going to be sharing rooms with a whole bunch of them. So you have this sort of a forced proximity that a lot of times still presents itself when you go out and about. And I just didn't see that in that family. So it's, he really did cut himself off from all of that, the good and the bad,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Meanwhile, on the flip side, we were dealing with this elder out here doing her root work in the mountains. That community is cohesive to the point of absolute regimentation. So,
Yes.
There's these two ends of the spectrum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of, I thought the community they had built was kind of cool. Like that aspect I loved. I was like, yeah, because everybody get to eat and everybody get to be together. And this is a thing that I'm going to talk about in this upcoming chapter for a book on folk horror that I'm loosely outlining still right now. I'm gonna have to sit down and really write that soon. But one of the things that I want to argue is that, like that community though, it functioned as a community where folklore, it was really heavily influenced by that. And by legend and by, but we know that this works, or this is the whole idea of sacrifice. And so I think that it's a really good example of folk horror because of the community where this takes place mostly. And the fact that community is so cohesive and it is so regimented. It's like, hey, this is how we do stuff, and there's good things about that. I mean, the whole killing folks and, taking their body and things, that's kind of not cool. It's not great, I guess. But, the other stuff, though, I thought was pretty good. That's pretty good community right there.
Right. So we've talked about Lex, we've talked about Ma, we've talked about Red, we've talked about these grandmothers out here in the Appalachian Mountains doing their thing. One thing that struck me thinking about all these women, I used to have my long hair, right? And I'm big. People will still be coming up, just grabbing my hair, just touching me, grabbing my hair, putting their fingers in my hair, doing whatever on the street, traveling, or, at events or whatever. They didn't even know me. And I know from talking with folks and hearing and seeing anecdotal stuff on the internet, or talking with like Crystal Connor and all her stuff when she travels, like, how would these women deal with somebody just coming up, grabbing on their hair?
Ooh, they would draw back enough. I tell you that. Like it's crazy because the cult leader, she wouldn't have been having it. As soon as they'd have been reaching for it, she done threw a spell that's gonna make the arm just fall off, because she can already see it coming, right? Adelaide would probably do much of the same, except that her thing would be, why would you want to touch it? Right? And then Red, though, would be like, I don't know, is it going to endanger my kids? Is my family in trouble? Is this really that big of a deal? Because she did seem to be pretty avoidant of a lot of stuff. Like if she could just avoid things, she would. Right? And so, I don't know, they might almost get away with it with her. But that Sue-Ann, I don't know, if she thought that she thought that was going to help her to get to that man, she might have done it. I mean, she might let him touch her hair. I don't know. But I know she would hold a grudge about it, though. And she'd be like, okay, when I get through killing all these kids and I'm going to work through their parents, too, then I'm gonna get you next on my list. So yeah, no, and I love that. I love the idea of that. They wouldn't be having it at all.
I don't want to say, I'm sure you probably also dealt with this too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, all the time. Well, I'm kind of lucky in that, like when I went to Romania back in 2017, and I could already tell by well, first of all, I had a stopover in Frankfurt. And by the time I got there, I already kind of understood that was not going to be a whole bunch of Black people. Right. And so by the time I got to Bucharest, like these numbers are dwindling. And so by the time I got to Bucharest, I was already like, okay, I'm in this space. It is what it is. And then when we went to the mountains where the actual conference was, I already knew it was a done deal. So I just, asked our tour people, hey, so are there any Black people around? There's a whole lot of Black people come around. Because I already know the answer, but I just want to see what you're going to tell me. And they were like, not really. Like at university, we have African students, but a lot of the people here in these towns don't go to college. They don't go to university like that. And so it was easy for me to say to myself, well, I get why I get the stares, because I had my hair at that time in these twists that looked more like locks. And so, the idea was he went to this one fort, right? And this group of middle schoolers were there, and their person came over, the grown up, and was like, well, they really like your hair, and they wanted to know if they could take a picture with you. And I'm sitting there going, oh, the question wasn't, can they touch it? Because apparently the kids have better manners than a lot of grown folks. They weren't trying to touch my hair. They weren't trying to approach me like that. They just wanted a picture. And I'm like, well, I guess I can see how that could be okay. Sure. Because you asked so nicely and you didn't touch my hair, right? That was really the reason why I told them yes, because nobody's touching my hair. But it's a thing. It's just something about that personal space. And I understand being intrigued. Sometimes I see hairstyles on other sisters where I'm like, ooh, that's nice. Oh, that's tight. That's nice. And I might say, girl, that hair is laid, but I'm not going to touch it. I would never think about touching it. Like, I'll admire it. And when I let her know I'm looking at it, so she'll know I'm checking it, because I might want to do that too. But I would never think to touch it. Like, would you touch anybody's glasses, or, you know what I mean? Or touching pregnant bellies? Like, I just don't understand that idea of touching folks. Why would you want to do that? Anyway, it's rude. It's just so rude.
Well, there, potentially some sort of collective ownership mentality or something. I don't know, but that could be a whole other episode, honestly. But
yes,
you did mention African university students. I've been seeing this about the plight of the African university students trying to get out of Ukraine now during this war, this conflict, and how that has been such a struggle because of various issues that they're confronted with when they actually get to the borders of these other countries.
Yeah.
And we've also had, in the past, we've had a whole huge Free Britney movement. And all of a sudden, now that we've got an actual Britney and actual imprisonment, that hashtag has vaporized and is nowhere to be found. And I was wondering if you want to comment on that, since we are dealing with Black women in horrific situations.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, first of all, I really feel for Griner's wife. It's a terrible situation to be in, to have your spouse in a place where that anti-Blackness pervades, but also misogyny and homophobia. And so she has all these strikes already, and she's in a place that appreciates none of that. And so I'm very, very, I try to remember, to try to keep her family and loved ones uplifted as well as her. But I'm with you, the quiet, it's deafening. And I'm like, wait a minute, but these people, there's war happening, and these people have her there. Like, do you even know that she's still there? And you get these reports that come out, well, now she's going to be there even longer. And it's like, but is she okay? Why do we not know if she's okay, though? And how is she being treated? And I don't care what she did. I don't care if she smuggled in a weed tree as tall as her. I don't care what she did. You still are supposed to have your day in court, and you're still supposed to be treated humanely. And the fact that she's a queer Black woman, it seemed to have skipped over a lot of people because they're not talking about it as much as I would like. I mean, I see where Hillary Clinton has lent her voice now, maybe yesterday or day before that, in talking about, let's get her home. But I mean, and it's great. I'm glad to see that. But at the same time, I don't know I do know why it's not all over everything. But it makes me really sad because she should not be held as a war criminal. I mean, as a prisoner of war, because she has nothing to do with that. And it's just not good.
Well, I mean, if you look into her, she is an actual top of her field superstar. She was the first openly gay athlete endorsed by Nike. She's got so many things tied up into her, and there's a silence, this pervasive silence, and you've got to ask yourself if it was Tom Brady. You've been visiting Russia or somewhere near there and got snatched up.
Oh my gosh.
And they're holding him for 3 weeks and nobody has seen him. Do you think there'd be silence?
Exactly. No. And there wouldn't be. And anybody saying otherwise is a whole lie. Because I remember when those athletes were traveling to Brazil and they were very rowdy. Did they tear up some property, like some hotel rooms or something? And there never was any question on them not being held. right? There was never any question on that. It was always like, oh yeah, well, boys will be boys, and okay, there was that whole thing, right? Of course, we weren't in the middle of like aggression with weaponry, right? And we were not at that time. But it would seem to me that because we are, that there should be even more of an urgency to get her from there. She is a Houston hometown girl. And so,
okay.
Yeah, so it's like a big deal, right? And you would think, but these are Texans, love to run their mouth about other stuff, love to run their mouth about stuff that had nothing to do with them. And I'm like, nobody? She's a Texas fellow Texan. I'm not sure she still lives here, but this is where she grew up, right? And I'm like, so you're not okay, so that doesn't count. She's not Texan enough. All of a sudden now it's not Texans and our freedoms. Okay, I see how this is going. And it's very telling, because when things affect Black women, mostly, you're gonna get a lot of silence from a lot of different spectrums, a lot of different areas. I hate that. It is a thing. That's what it is.
Well, hopefully that situation is resolved. Definitely feeling for her family, community,
Yes.
And the multiple communities that she resides in. So, and of course, obviously, the people of Ukraine at large, and everybody's been displaced by that.
Yes.
And even the people of Russia, that it seems like the average person in Russia is also against this war. We're seeing more and more of that. Hopefully, all the people have been arrested in the protests and whatnot over there. Hopefully things work out for them as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. Agreed. War is never good for anybody. Not any of us below a certain, I would say, income or power level. Like the people that are moving the pawns around and who are manipulating the economies and stuff, things are always great for them. But there's regular people that are affected by this. And so I'm with you. Yeah, ditto. I really feel for all of us common folks, like in all of these communities that are just sitting around looking and going, what in the world is going, what's really happening? Like, why are we doing this? And why are you doing this? And this is not what we're trying to have happen. I honestly didn't think that we were going to see something this big. I mean, and people say, oh, well, that's just the privileged viewpoint. It is, because we live here. And in America, the last wars that were fought here on this soil were between us. We were fighting each other, right? Now, we had friends, I had a lot of friends, as probably you do too, that were shipped out to the Iraqi war. So they did see combat action then. And so it's not like I'm saying, oh no, there was no fighting going on, but like this has the potential to escalate into something that's global. And I guess all this action does have that potential. But I think this is the first time, and I hear people talking about Gen X and we should be used to hiding. And I'm thinking, no, like we talked about, like I wasn't worried about war when I was growing up. I was worried about the war right here. I was worried about the war in my urban neighborhood and like against poor people and, that whole thing out in the South. I was worried about, the Klan, because they don't call themselves a Klan anymore. Like now, of course, they call themselves your position makers. They call them your business owners and your CEOs and your law officials, your judges and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of pretty true. But I was more worried about that stuff. Again, I guess that's sort of a privilege because I didn't have to worry about our homes being bombed. I didn't have to worry about people from other countries infiltrating and trying to colonize us right then. But at the same time, I have a sympathy for people who can't focus on this as the only thing that's happening. Right? Like it's terrible. And I really hope that it goes away as fast as it can and that people are not able to do these kind of things as easily as this has come about. But at the same time, we have to sort of be multifaceted. We got to think about all the wars on every front. And one of them is making sure that Black women are as important as any other citizen, right? That's a war. That's a battle that we've been constantly fighting.
Yes, absolutely. I remember on the day of that attack on the newspaper in France, the Charlie Attack, that Charlie magazine that was like the satire magazine that kept making fun of Allah and Islam. And they had told him, okay, well, these threats against you are pretty serious. Do you want police protection? And they're like, no. And the guy showed up and I think killed 14 people or whatever. On the same day, we were dealing with all these historic black churches being burned down all over the place. There was a bomb that was left at a civil rights office, and that was pretty much getting buried. And I tried speaking up about it, and people were shouting me down because stuff was happening in France. And it's like, well, we've been dealing with, people have been dumping toxic stuff in our neighborhoods, and it was a big case out here, at least, and I imagine this was happening around the rest of the country when I was coming up. At least up into the 90s, they were using random black people they were grabbing off the street to use to train the police dogs to attack people and stuff, and all sorts of things around here. Just is a struggle every single day. So
exactly.
Like you mentioned, again, which circle are we talking about? Which audience? Which people?
Yes.
Which, again, is I'm sure something that we will return to in subsequent episodes of genre Blackademia. Do you have any parting comments here that you'd like to mention to folks about Black women protagonists?
My drum that I'm always beating on is we need more. More, please.
More. Okay.
Yes, more, please. And not just stereotypes. We need all the nuance, all of that. I think we're beyond just asking for representation, because every bit of representation ain't good representation. Right? So no, I think that if we're gonna, I think we need more. Because there's nuance there, right? That just is largely untapped. Literally, the world is so wide open, we can do all of this stuff. So why wouldn't we? It's worthless.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like you said, more. We need more Black women front and center. So, I don't know. I hope some of the folks out here in the audience will definitely, if you have not delved into some of these works like Ma, Us, Spell, Healing versus Predator, others that we didn't even get into like Beloved and Gothica and all these things, definitely seek them out, seek out these creators, these actors, and definitely creators like Rhonda, whose work is out there.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Lots of stuff. Yes.
And thank you for joining us on this inaugural episode of Genre Blackademia. And we'll be coming back at you again shortly with our next episode about to drop. Okay, peace. Take care of yourselves.
You have been listening to Episode 1, Black Women Protagonists in Horror. For more information and resource links, please visit our show notes. If you need to reach out to us directly, you can contact Genre Blackademia Podcast at gmail.com, or you can interact with us on our social media, Genre Blackademia Podcast on Instagram, and the Genre Blackademia Podcast channel on YouTube. The Genre Blackademia Podcast theme song, What's Thou Like to Live Blackady, was performed and recorded by Rage Inducer, copyright 2022. All other music licensed via audio.com. This production is part of the All Access Con podcasting network. All rights reserved. Copyright 2022.